Alright, today let's take a look at the Frankford Arsenal Brass Prep Center. I picked this up kind of wanting to try something different. I've been using the Lee little handheld trimmers. You can put it into a drill, and then there's a ball handle. And I've been using that to trim my cartridge brass, which is actually a very easy system to use, and it's very inexpensive. It's only, I don't know, $5 or $6 per cartridge that you reload, and it pretty much automatically sizes to the length you need it to go. But I got a little tired of screwing them in and out, and then the fact that I have to chamfer inside and outside and clean the primer pockets just ends up being kind of a long process with the Lee one. And if I did a large batch of brass, say a couple hundred 308s or 223s, my hands ended up being very sore at the end. So I was really looking at something like a Gerard trimmer, but in the end decided to spend a little less money and go with this. So this does use a collet trimmer. You can see here's some of the pieces. There's the inside and outside chamfer, the primer pocket cleaner, and then of course the cutting head in the middle. And what you do is you set it up using a couple of the different little pieces here. There's the plastic pieces on the right that kind of grip the piece of brass that you're holding. And then on the left are different pieces that actually index on the shoulder of the cartridge that you're reloading. So when you get it set up, each case will index off the shoulder and then will trim to the proper length. So you should be able to get, with sized cases, a very consistent length. And then even though it's a different process to chamfer inside and outside, everything's running, everything's right next to it. So you can stick the piece of brass in like a pencil sharpener and then chamfer inside, outside, flip it around, cleaning the primer pocket, and it's a very quick process. Here I'm just setting up each of the little accessories. Now these should be a fairly standard thread size, so if you have maybe a case brush, if you want to clean out your brushes. I did pick up a crimp remover that I'm going to try, probably in that top one. So get those set up, and then you've got to actually set up the cartridge case. So I kind of mentioned before the way it uses plastic fingers to grip the cartridge, and then it also uses that little metal disc. And the metal disc you want to set up properly, and you want to set it and select the one that goes with the size of brass that you're trimming. I think here it's good to note, I've been using the cutting head that it comes with. So far I haven't really had any problems. It kind of seems a little slow cutting, but it's not horrible. And I have cut hundreds of pieces of brass, 308, a lot of 260, and then maybe 200, 300 Blackout or so. And so far I haven't had any problems. I know a lot of people, if you look at the reviews online, prefer to use a carbide cutter from RCBS or one of the other big manufacturers. I haven't tried that myself, but supposedly the thread pattern is the same, so you should be able to pick up the RCBS version and then install it on this and have a little bit faster cutting. Alright, so here I'm getting ready to install the fingers and the little metal washer. I noticed it was a lot easier to go ahead and install it on a piece of brass so that it guides everything in there. And then this is one of the kind of difficult parts. It's not overly difficult, but it does take some time to kind of play with and get it just right, because I felt like the thread in and out was the opposite of what you would expect it to be, so that took a little bit of getting used to. But basically you want to get it so that a piece of brass will go till it's just touching on the cutting blades, and then you can adjust it in a little bit as you want to figure out exactly how much trim you want on that piece of brass. So here I'm going to go ahead and hook it up, and I'm going to measure a piece of brass as it is, and then I'm going to start adjusting it, and I'm going to start cutting it until I get it back to the actual overall length that I want for that piece of brass. Overall, the machine isn't too loud. I actually left out most of the volume for this because I had a lot of interruptions from the kids. So trying to speak over it just wasn't working very well. And then just the machine in general, even though it's not real loud, it was loud enough that it kind of messed with the speaking part. So as you get this set up, this can take a little time. It seemed to take longer for me the very first time, and then as I've done it since, it's definitely gotten faster. But you want to make sure you get it set to cut to the right length initially. What I found was actually easier is if you do have a piece of brass that is basically cut the size you want, it's a little bit easier to take that piece of brass that's the right length and then go ahead and put it in there and keep adjusting until it comes just barely into contact with the cutters. And then once you do that, lock everything down and then try to trim the next piece of brass, and that should get you really close. You may still have to adjust just a little bit, but that seems to be a whole lot easier than what I did here initially, which was adjust it in a little bit, measure it, adjust it in, measure, adjust it in, measure, etc. So eventually I got it set up to where it was cutting the brass, and I believe this was 308 that I was running the very first time just to kind of get used to it. I wanted to try it out on some 308 that didn't matter quite as much before I went and trimmed my actual Lapua 260 brass that I definitely didn't want to mess up. So with everything set up, it takes a little bit of time at first, but now that it's set up, you're ready to go. And you basically are going to put your piece of brass in just like a pencil sharpener. I like to twist it a little bit. I feel like sometimes just pushing it straight in, it would feel like it stopped cutting, but then I would twist it a little bit and I'd feel some more cuts. Then you can do your inside and outside chamfer, and it really doesn't take much for those to work. Just very little chamfer, or very little pressure, and it cuts a really nice chamfer. And then I have the primer pocket cleaner installed in the top. So once you have this set up, and on a bigger case like a 308 or the 260, it's actually pretty easy. It's very comfortable. I think maybe the carbide blade would have cut it a little faster, but overall it just takes a few seconds for each case, and it definitely didn't seem to mess with my hands as much as the old Lee version did. Now, here we're getting into trimming 300 Blackout brass, and this definitely works for that, but as you can see here, the 300 Blackout brass is so short that it's actually pretty difficult to get it all the way into where it'll cut and still get a good grip with your hand. I found a lot of times where I was actually having to pull the brass out with my fingernails, and that was not comfortable, especially for a longer session. If you're trying to trim a few hundred, especially if you wanted to do 1,000 pieces of 300 Blackout brass, if you were converting it from 223, you would definitely want to break this up into different sessions. This is definitely where I think something like a Gerard might be a little more handy, because it not only cuts, but it chamfers inside and outside all in one motion. So that was what I really would have liked to have, but this was considerably cheaper. I picked it up on Midway, and I don't remember the exact price. I'm not going to quote a price because that can change. I bought this a couple months ago, and I've been playing with it before I finally got around to making the video, so I had a better idea of how it worked. But Midway had a better price than my local Sportsman's did, so I went ahead and picked it up. Overall, I've been pleased with it. It takes a few minutes to set up for each cartridge, and it's not really ideal for 300 Blackout. But compared to the Lee trimmer that I was using, yes, it cost quite a bit more money, but at the same time, it's been a lot easier to use, and my hands don't come away nearly as sore and just uncomfortable as they had been. I would actually get blisters on my fingers from the Lee one if I did a large batch of brass. So this has been working quite a bit better than that. And I do like the idea of the different cleaning stations or the different accessory stations. I haven't used much other than what you see here so far, but I do definitely plan on trying out that crimp remover once I get around to reloading some 223, or if I cut down some new 300 Blackout brass. And then I may look and see what some of the others. I don't know that I would necessarily use the inside of the case brush or anything like that, because I do clean my brass. So I don't know that there's a huge advantage of that for me. But overall, I definitely think it's a good tool for the money. It seems to be a little bit of a compromise between the Lee or another, version of a case prep station. The Frankford Arsenal's a pretty good price. And it does add the case trimming, where some of the case prep stations just offer the chamfer and the primer pocket cleaning. So I'm happy with the purchase. It's not as nice as a more expensive tool could have been. I still kind of wouldn't mind a Gerard someday, but for now this is definitely going to be the way I continue to trim my brass and process my brass. Definitely cut some time down there. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section below. If you want to see anything else specific, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching.